Um, well, my name is Fernandes. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Campinas, Brazil. And well, my background is I've been studying the spinal cord circuits, mainly those related to the motor control. So the idea of my work and my current work is to do a multi-scale model to study motor control. So as in other talks has been said, we can model several scales from synaptic passing through membrane, transmembrane scales to a cellular and even a populational scale. And in my particular case, I'm interested in studying those neural mechanisms that affect the generation of force. Well, and each one of these scales has its particularities, its metrics, inputs and outputs. And the idea is to, my main goal of research is to understand how this is, how each scale can impact in the other, and so on. So for this course particularly, I focused on this scale, the cellular one. And I've been working my current work. I've been using this kind of model for for a neuron, for motor neuron specifically, which comprises two compartments, a soma and a dendrite, with one segment each one. And my initial proposal for the course was to implement some morphological models such as this one that has been 3D typified and which has already been implemented with several compartments. But I decided to discourse in a week, tried something smaller because this would be too much for me in a week. And fortunately, for this same model, for this neuron, there is a reduced model by Powers and NLIs, which reduces this complex neuron to a less degree of complexity, but an intermediate complexity from this one. So here I have a dendrite that has multiple segments, and we have an axon hillock and an initial segment. And well, for the course then, this model is available in ModelDB, one of the reasons I chose it. And a particular part of this was to rewrite it in Neuron Python. It was in Hawk, but it was not a direct import. I tried that, but this did not work, mainly because this model is, the neuron is specified in multiple files. There are a file that creates its passive properties and another one that changes inserts the mechanisms. And so we had to rewrite in Neuron Python. And this was specifically challenging because this model has lots of conductance, including AP characteristics, some conductances related to persistent currents as well. And another challenge was that in this Hawk syntax, this kind of syntax that was new to me, that you can choose a range of location. So this means from, it's kind of represented here, that from 0 to 0.2, there is a range of diameters, and then you can change it in the other part of the dendrite. And it takes places, it happens in this model for several conductances, mainly in the dendrite. So this was a thing for me in this course, and I had a lot of help from Joe, from Robert as well. And well, we could do that. And well, then then the next steps would be that I did was to reproduce some of the experiments from this paper that this model was presented, and try to simulate a pool of neurons. So this first experiment, again, the paper, it's in silico experiment in the paper and here. So this first experiment is injection of a triangular current into the soma compartment, and I see, let's come from top to down, the membrane potential from both soma and dendrite. Here I have the firing rate, and here I have a plot of the firing rate as a function of the injected current. So things that are important here is this, a lot of things that are important, but this acceleration of current is a thing to be interesting for me because it's related to the persistent currents. And here I show the results from the paper, the reported results for the model. And although I couldn't get the exact numbers as they showed, the behavior I was able to represent this behavior, and it was very satisfying for me that this worked at this level. So our next simulation was now stimulating the neuron with a net stim, with a synaptic mechanism, and with this single net stim firing rate increasing the rate and also the variability. So I have here the firing rate of the neuron, and again the membrane potential in time from soma and dendrite, and here the results from reported by the paper. Here the stimulus was a little bit different from what they reported, but I tried to mimic this, what they call time varying conductance. Then I tried to mimic this with a synapses activated by a net stim. And this was a nice thing to see, because there are two different slopes in this firing rate related to the persistent currents. And finally, in the simulation is a different paradigm of stimulation, that I had 400 net stims connected with a 30% of connectivity probability into a pool made of 20 neurons, 20 motor neurons that had linear varying parameters. And here I changed only soma diameter and length and the leakage conductance of soma, so I can have some difference between the neurons. And here the synapse was distributed in a uniform location from 0.1 to 0.9. This is a nice thing for me to see that I could not see, and when I had just one segment for the dendrite, because with one segment it doesn't really change the, if I do this range distribution of the synapses. And well, every net stim had a increasing firing rate. So I call this the drive signal from these net stims. And here I have the spikes from these 20 motor neurons. And here an interesting thing that we can see is that as they are different from each other, they have different excitability. And we can see here the different recruiting of the neurons. And moreover, we have here the firing rates for every other motor neuron. And when we see this, the different recruitment and also the different firing rates. So what we call the recruitment and the firing rate coding, right? And this effect of what some call the onion skin, where the last recruited fires a lower firing rate. And well, this is very this was very I was very happy to see this, to be able to change the parameters of this kind of a little more complex model, and to see this onion skin effect. And I also, as a additional thing that I try to do, I work on a force generation function that I work with, that I developed, that uses these spikes to create force. So this would be the force generated by this motor neuron pool, and this would mean this force generation was parameterized for the a muscle of the hand, but it doesn't really have too much physiological meaning here, because these neurons were not tuned to have the right firing rate. But this was something I was going for, and I was really happy to see this effect here. And next steps would be to tune this so I can have a force that is related to some neural physiological measurements. And other thing is to have more neurons, because a typical pool of motor neurons that controls, let's say, this the first dorsal interosseous of the hand have 120 motor neurons. Some bigger muscles have hundreds of motor neurons. So this simulation takes long, so I reduced to see the effect, to have a result. And the idea is to make it more neurons, tune them, and observe, like, if we change some parameter in the motor neurons, what would happen with the firing rate, or even with the variability of this force. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. Here's just a picture of where I'm located, my university, the University of Campinas. And feel free to contact me. I want to thank all the tutors for all the talks, the exercises, and mainly Joe for all the help and teachings during this week. That's it. Thank you.
Well done, Hector. Oh, I love it. Yeah, I want to point out real quick that a lot of neural models, you don't really know much about the inputs or the outputs. And that's why a neuromusculoskeletal modeling is so exciting to me. He can output his simulation into a force. And so the next step for me would be link that to a sensory neuron to get that force back into the neural model. And now you've got real inputs, real outputs, and it's, to me, very exciting. Well done, Hector. Questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out that, the recruitment and rate coding, so you only compared it with the results from the model, but that is also the exact results you see experimentally. So these are sort of classic experiments that haven't been modeled much. So you got a pool of motor neurons, and, say you're increasing the amount of activation into that pool. Well, you need morphological diversity in order to get that pool output. You need a bunch of different shaped cells. So the smaller ones activate first, and then as more comes in, you get recruitment. So rate coding, you increase the frequency of individual cell, and recruitment, you recruit more and more motor neurons based on increasing drive. This is fabulous. This is a great start to some really interesting work. I would, as long as there's no other questions, real quick. Yeah, where do you plan on taking it next? Do you add sensory? Do you? It'd be fun to see a flexor extensor. So on the same limb, a flexor extensor with the feedback between.
Yes, that would be a nice way to go. One of the limitations we have today is that force signal is processed after NetPyNE runs, neuron runs. So simulation runs, I get spikes and regenerate force. So in order to have that, I would have to model some kind of in simulation time force calculation, or some kind of muscular fuse model that depends on the force, on the stretching of the muscle. So you can feedback this as an afferent to see things going.
I'll bet you could create a mod file that would do this for you during the simulation. It would add all that stuff up. So yeah, for the future, yeah, look into that also.
Yeah,
because you're right, you need the real-time connection in order to have that really play out nicely.
And we do have this example in the examples folder with the connected to a virtual arm, where you use this run simulation with interval function, where you can send and receive information during the simulation run. And there's actually a practical example that controls a very simple arm and sends some motor commands and receives the proprioception of the arm. So you can
yeah, great. So there's already an example in place. Very cool.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector.
Thank you.